Kick things off. Good morning, good afternoon, hello. I'm Sophia Arend, Senior Analyst at the Global Blockchain Business Council, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to the inaugural episode of the GBBC Virtual Members Forum with GBBC member Algorand's Director of Business Solutions, David Markley. This forum is organized by the Global Blockchain Business Council, commonly referred to as the GBBC. We're the global industry association for the blockchain technology ecosystem, focused on educating global business leaders, government officials, and regulators on the benefits of blockchain technology, advocating for smart adoption, and helping our members and networks form partnerships to grow the industry. The Virtual Members Forum is a new webinar series taking place every other week where we highlight the work of our members and their recent projects to inform business leaders and the broader global audience on the real-world applications of the technology. In this session, we will hear from GBBC member Algorand, the creator of the world's first open source, permissionless, pure proof of stake blockchain protocol designed for the next generation of financial products. David Markley, Algorand's Director of the Solutions, will present on the Algorand blockchain and on Algorand's project to develop the world's first national digital currency, the Marshallese sovereign. At Algorand, David leads Algorand's business solutions team, who are focused on partnerships, solution architecture, investments, portfolio management, and building new blockchain-based financial products. Prior to leading business solutions at Algorand, David was a product leader at Carbon Black, which had its IPO in 2017 and was subsequently acquired by VMware. We would also like to introduce Dr. Andrea Civelli, Senior Economist at Algorand and an Associate Professor in Economics at the University of Arkansas. His main research interests are monetary macroeconomics and banking, international finance, and applied econometrics. Andrea received his PhD in economics from Princeton University, and his research has been published in numerous economic and financial journals. He will be joining David for the audience Q&A. We encourage you to submit questions at any time during this presentation in the Q&A tab at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We will anonymize your questions and pose them to David and Andrea after the presentation. We hope you enjoyed today's forum. I would now like to pass things over to David. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Sophia. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening for everyone tuning in. My name is David Markley. Really looking forward to being a part of GBBC and helping kick off the Virtual Members Forum. Looking forward to all the great work that everybody else in this community is doing, and we're looking forward to collaborating with everyone going forward. I did ask Andrea here to join us for the Q&A, so unfortunately it was a little bit of a last-minute ad, so we don't have his face up here, but Andrea and I have worked on this project together for quite some time. We're pretty excited to share the work that we've been doing, and hopefully we can answer all of your questions. So without further ado, and Sophia, you want to just confirm that everyone can hear me, or Andrea?
Yep, very good.
All right, perfect. So without further ado, at the highest level, let's start with who is Algorand, what is our identity, and what do we aspire to be? And at its core, Algorand is really technology that enables economic exchange. And so most people immediately associate that with the financial institutions and cross-border payments, things that blockchains have become well known for. But really, we see economic exchange being much broader than that. As an example, and we'll get into some more use cases later, but we have companies tokenizing things such as idle GPU cycles and tokenizing them and then trading them in a secondary market across their ecosystem. And so in order to enable that type of economic exchange, the three things that we have a lot of domain expertise in and really focus on are enterprise speed, advanced cryptographic security, and making the blockchain as easy and efficient to use as possible. So both in deployment and developing your solution on top of Algorand. So at its core, for those of you that don't know, that's Algorand in a nutshell. To kind of plan the next 20 minutes or so, wanted to introduce you to the broader team. So it has taken not just Sivo and I, or Andrea and I, but an army within Algorand to help move opportunities like this forward. So wanted to introduce you to the team that made this possible. We'll do a quick review of the public blockchain platforms, some of the trade-offs that those have required, and then the Algorand benefits and what we've brought to market. Additionally, we've recently talked about what we call internally a co-chain idea, but the essence is providing interoperability between private and public platforms, which we are piloting and building with the Marshall Islands. Last but certainly not least, we'll highlight the ecosystem use cases and then ultimately dive into the sovereign currency here, known as the SOV, which is going to be issued on top of Algorand's platform. So without further ado, the rest of the Algorand team. So for those of you that don't know, Algorand was founded by Silvio Micali. Silvio, longtime MIT professor, has been essential and integral in inventing a lot of the core cryptography, a lot of the core security models that we use in our protocol today. And so with him at the forefront of the technological advancements, we've assembled a world-class team out of MIT, but also out of other open source backgrounds, people from Mozilla, like Naveed and Sunula, and other academic luminaries across cryptography, distributed systems, and computer science. To round out the technical team, we're also joined by business leaders. Serial entrepreneur Steve Kokinos launched Blade Logic and had a successful exit there, and also launched the company called Fuse, which is slated to have another wonderful exit here. Joining him on the execution side, Sean Ford, has been an executive most recently at LogMeIn, and he leads all the operations here at Algorand. So really a strong both business and academic team and technological team that has really built the foundation to which has enabled all of the use cases we'll talk about here. So taking a step back, when we started on our journey, when Silvio started on looking at the existing solutions that were in the market today and the other public platforms that were available, he noticed that there were some forced trade-offs, some forced decisions that businesses and others had to make before they were able to achieve their business goals. And so some of the shortcomings, what has been tagged as the blockchain trilemma, where you can't be truly decentralized, scalable, or secure. You can only pick two of those things. That really forces organizations to make trade-offs that they might not necessarily want to make. Certainly, enterprises don't want to trade off security. Scalable is just part of everyone's business, and so it needs to be robust. And so really you start to sacrifice on decentralization, which makes you prone to different types of network attacks. And so if you don't have all three, you really have a shortcoming of a platform. Additionally, I think many of you are familiar, but blockchain notoriously has been difficult to use with custom languages and models that you have to write perfect code every single time. And once it's committed, we've seen the economic consequences of what that difficulty and those barriers to entry have provided in the marketplace. Beyond that, in the proof of work systems, extremely high cost and consume an enormous amount of power. To help put that in perspective, the annual Bitcoin mining pool right now, or mining pools, I should say, consume about 70 terawatt hours of energy annually. And that is roughly the energy consumption of the Czech Republic, about 11 million people. So proof of work certainly has an economic and environmental impact that we're very conscious of as we transition and shift to being more aware of the environment. And so along came proof of stake in its many different forms and varieties, again, forcing you to make some of these trade-offs. Just to highlight, in delegated proof of stake, you're essentially reducing who is in charge of consensus, so that trust, again, becomes centralized, and you can be targeted. And if it's within a handful of people who are approving every transaction, those people might be manipulated or they could be hacked. And so if it's not truly decentral, you still are relying on a small subset of people to really enforce the trustworthiness of the platform. Conversely, bonded systems are another approach where you put up collateral to essentially protect a transaction. Well, if you end up making more money in your transaction than the collateral you've posted, you might be incentivized to game the system that way and take advantage of the financial incentive mechanisms that exist. So long story short, there were some shortcomings with other platforms. And so in order to really accelerate, we developed Algorand's pure proof of stake platform. And to run through exactly what we've brought to market and its technical benefits, the platform supports over 1,000 transactions per second. Consensus is truly decentral, so anyone can participate, and it scales to billions of users without having an adverse effect on performance. Every block is globally propagated, so all of the transactions are final every 4 seconds. And we've also been mathematically guaranteed to never fork. Forking, for those of you that aren't familiar, is a problem that's introduced which may create uncertainty in the processing of a transaction. So you might think that you've posted something to the blockchain, but in fact there is a competing fork or a competing chain, and now your transaction's been erased and you have to go through the process again. Algorand prevents that from happening. That parlays into the security of our network. So we've taken a very robust approach in having third-party reviews, audits, and doing different types of penetration attacks against our network. And so we've taken a very strong position, both with cryptography, but also with the economic theory that underpins our blockchain platform. And we know, certainly with the core engine built, it really doesn't matter unless people are able to take advantage of these capabilities and plug it into their existing frameworks. And so we've built standard SDKs, software development kits, in pretty much every major language that developers are using today: Java, JavaScript, Python, etc. It's open source, which allows businesses to interact, build on top of the platform, and iterate extremely quickly. And one of the key benefits of proof of stake systems is that they're extremely energy efficient. And so unlike consuming 70 terawatt hours or so, or a small country's energy consumption, proof of stake systems collectively, thousands of degrees, more efficient than something like a proof of work system. And so these are kind of the core benefits that Algorand's next generation platform provides. And on top of that, we've seen a breadth of new use cases, which we'll talk about in just a second. And so before we talk about the rest of the ecosystem that's built on top of our public platform, we've also recognized that there is a desire for more fine-grained controls. And a lot of the enterprises that we've been talking to and working with really have started from implementation with a private and permissioned blockchain setup. And we believe this makes a lot of sense. It actually follows the same pattern of evolution of the internet. Most of us now use the internet, but long before we were all seamlessly interconnected. Many companies were using intranets and had these private implementations that were on-prem that people used. And for many applications, if they're critical infrastructure, people still have those private implementations today. And so at Algorand, we totally appreciate that you can have each one. It can have its own optimized use case where the public platform can act as that interconnective tissue where all of us can start to exchange and transact and have this kind of efficient and secure transaction with one another in a peer-to-peer fashion. But you can also need the controls around privacy, around security that the private and permission platform offers. And so bridging these two worlds, we know that we need to have an interoperable solution. And we've recently just written our blog, and we've got a forthcoming white paper, which I believe is also available today. And so you can go read all about it. It's called the Algorand Co-Chain. The Co-Chain bridges these two worlds, so you can have a private permissioned enclave, which we call a co-chain, that is also interoperable with the public chain or other co-chains that are on there as well. And so it really gives these enterprises, these organizations, these governments, the flexibility to choose between having an easy-to-use platform where all users can onboard, where they can introduce new products and gain much broader access on a public platform, but then have selective data disclosure within their private domain. And so this blending and this interoperability has really paved the way, and it's what's enabled the SOV use case as well. So don't just take my word for it. We've seen an enormous amount of uptake and adoption kind of globally as we started in June with the core platform, the core public release of June last year. We've seen a breadth of partners come on board, a breadth of ecosystem participants, whether it's universities, infrastructure, other technology providers, business integrators. So we've seen a fast and global adoption here. To help sub-segment this a little bit, and we'll talk a little more specifically around some of the use cases that we've recently highlighted. We really try and see this within a lens of 3 different emerging verticals here for us. The first, asset tokenization. And so as part of our release, we introduced what we call the Algorand standard asset. It's a standardized template that people can use to create any digital representation they want. So you could think of this as the effective equivalent of an Ethereum fungible token, an Ethereum non-fungible token, and an Ethereum security token. And one great example is the World Chess Organization in partnership with Algorand, with Securitize, and with the London Stock Exchange is launching the first ever hybrid IPO, where they will be doing a joint listing on Algorand's platform with some issued tokens and also listed stocks via direct on the London Stock Exchange. And so we're very excited about bringing these tokenized assets to our ecosystem, enabling much broader accessibility to these types of financial instruments. In addition to that, another great use case that we've been working on is a company called Asset Block, which is tokenizing commercial real estate. Commercial real estate being the largest illiquid asset class in the world. You know, we've seen a lot of desire to fractionalize that and be able to really optimize people's portfolios with a much finer grain comb. And so Asset Block is working on that today with us and bringing those types of portfolio optimizations to hedge funds, to private equity firms, and other investors alike. And most recently, there's a company called Republic Labs. Republic is tokenizing their equity, but also tokenizing ownership in the portfolio companies that they help launch on their platform. So very interesting instrument. SEC approved one of the very first tokenized projects with SEC approval. They'll be launching on Algorand. And so we're very excited. And across the board here, what we've heard in terms of working with the platform is that it's extremely easy to use. The templates come standard out of the box, so very plug and play. The SDKs on top of it make it very accessible for developers and for others to create their asset and get up and working and really not have to focus so much on the complexity of the blockchain, but really focus more on their new business model or the new service that they're providing. Now, of course, with these assets, we need the infrastructure and the partners around it so that we can have on-ramps and off-ramps for people who want to invest in this ecosystem or for people that need additional reporting or identity services. And so this is by no means an all-inclusive look of that financial infrastructure. But to highlight a few, Stone Eyes is working on creating a platform essentially for clearing and settlement more efficiently, working out of the EU to work with some government bonds that will potentially be issued on the platform. And so their platform really enables that more secure clearing and settlement. Monerium is a e-money provider, so they're a licensed e-money solution where they are able to tokenize a breadth of different currencies, the pound, the euro, the Icelandic krona, etc. And so that enables people to use the currencies that they're already using today, but migrate into this ecosystem that's on Algorand and then get exposure to these new types of assets that we're tokenizing. And then finally here, we've got a great company called Bloomy that's built several different modules. The ones that are available today are Pay and Invoice. So now you can enable token-based payments and token-based invoices for a variety of different services. So you now have the infrastructure to get fiat into the ecosystem, put that to work in a traditional format, and then also be more secure, efficient, and faster with the traditional activities that you're doing. And last, but certainly not least, you know, we are keenly aware of the 20 or so central bank digital currency initiatives that are taking place around the world. There's many central banks that are investigating the benefits of migrating to a central bank digital currency on a blockchain or in another hybrid type deployment. And so we had a lot of interest from the Marshall Islands. Very excited to be working with them and to double click and get a little more specific into what we're working on. We'll start with, you know, what were the core priorities for the Marshall Islands? What were they trying to solve for? Certainly positioning themselves at the forefront of financial innovation was top of mind for them. Establishing a more flexible monetary policy system where they can have more influence and more governance over the monetary policy that's occurring within their ecosystem and their economy. Time to market was certainly a core criteria. It needed to be something that came ready, wasn't something that was needed to be built or a vision that was, you know, years down the road. They needed to be able to implement something much sooner rather than later. Of course, efficiency in the distribution and management of this currency, the ongoing costs associated with maintaining this platform, rolls into the overall cost. And so they wanted to ensure that they had the ability and the flexibility to update the contracts that were governing distribution, ability to go direct to consumer if they wanted to, and really be able to target the institutions who were receiving this money directly. And finally, even within the islands there, the cost of remittance is extremely high. A large subset of their population actually works around the globe and then will send money home. Anecdotally, based on our conversations, about 10% of all money that they receive goes to charges and fees to settle and just deal with the remittance cost. And so they were looking for a platform that could facilitate these payments and really streamline and reduce that cost profile for their citizens as well. And so in addition to the technical benefits of the Algorand platform, the speed, the security, the transaction finality, we highlighted a few of the innovative financial use cases that are on the platform today, but we really feel that is just the tip of the iceberg. And so we've been working with many companies to devise new business models, new software and services that they can provide on top of this standardized platform. And so in collaboration with Algorand, we work and endeavor to really help position the Republic of the Marshall Islands at the forefront of this financial innovation. And I think our ecosystem is representative of that. The monetary policy, going back to their more flexible system, it can really be implemented programmatically, so they can have a single contract that governs almost every transaction, or they can be more specific and have smaller contracts governing certain types of transactions, but it can be implemented and then scaled very quickly. So you can start with a contract governing a small subset, and then if it proves that the rules are being enforced, and after some beta or testing time, you can then immediately roll that out to the much broader population. And so we felt that Algorand, given its flexibility, its ease of use, the standard templates that we have, it was a very fast ramp for them to quickly create the asset, create their digital currency, and then also enable the management of that at scale. And so the platform really provided that solid foundation that they were looking for, and we could do it at a very fast clip. In terms of the distribution and the management, well, the same mechanism that you use to govern every transaction is the same mechanism that you can use to distribute. And so again, it gave them the ability to test their different distribution models or the different distribution mechanisms, where if they wanted to target the retailers and have a particular aid or fund distributed to that core group, they could do a test with one retailer as an example. They could see if that retailer met all of the conditions for aid, and then they could immediately and programmatically roll that out across all of the other retailers. And so this type of iteration in their monetary policy and the way that they're managing fund distribution really appealed to them in streamlining a lot of the back office operations. And finally, as many of us have come to know, that blockchain is an excellent tool for easing cross-border payments. Using an Algorand co-chain, they have the ultimate flexibility, the ultimate selection on what that cost profile is. And so within their private enclave, they can determine what that cost is going to be per transaction. They can price it in their own currency if they want. They could actually create an omnibus account and then pay for all transactions if they so choose. And so it really allowed them to take whatever approach was best fit for them on how to reduce the remittance costs for their citizens more broadly. And so this is, at the highest level, these are the things that were priorities, and this is the benefit that Algorand was able to bring to their platform. And so with that, it looks like we've got a few questions coming in. So that wraps up the slides portion here, and we'll go ahead and transition over to some questions.
Excellent. Yes, we've had a few questions come in. First off, we had a question come in asking, how will the Marshall Islands manage privacy issues related to the SOV? Are they going to perform KYC and AML?
Yeah. So within Algorand's ecosystem, we've got a number of identity partners. In this particular case, the Republic of the Marshall Islands has created a SOV governance, the SOV Foundation, that has oversight into onboarding and managing identity for the population. And so they will act as the identity custodians, for lack of a better term, and then they can assign that and map that to someone's digital wallet. And so you can set conditions such as you are not allowed to hold or transact with the SOV unless you also have this certificate authority or approval from this identity provider. And so that allows them to enforce that KYC and identity requirements across the board, across anyone who wants to transact with this particular instrument. So yes, they will be doing identity, and we have partners that we're working with in this SOV technical partnership. And you can read more about that on their website as well, the SOV Foundation website.
Excellent, thank you. We had another question come in. In terms of growth in the money supply, how is that going to be distributed? Is the plan to distribute it on a daily basis? And if so, how will that percentage be calculated? Yeah,
Andrea, would you like to take this one?
Sure. So like there is a fixed growth money that's been like established annually, and this is around 4%. And basically this is going to be split between the verifiers and the block proposers. Like 1% goes to them and 3% goes pro rata to the holders, the previous holders of the SOV. Is going to be based on like averages over the year. So it's a year-to-year type of program. The distribution, however, is like has some flexibility in terms of like money put in circulation from the initial supply of SOV. So like there is some flexibility there for the government to decide some margin of the distribution.
Is there a timeline for when this when the SOV will be launched?
Yeah. So it's outlined in their TRMI, which is their monetary distribution and initial issuance. So the way that they are introducing the currency to the broader public is over a 18-month period of rolling auctions. So to kind of bifurcate the question, Algorand's technical platform is live. You can create assets on it today. You can start creating smart contracts to govern the transactions and the governance of those types of assets. So that's available. We're working with the Marshall Islands to structure the way that they're introducing the currency, so their economic policy. And then beyond that, building out the integrations with the retailers, with the local, cash exchange centers. And so that's the part that's ongoing. But that over the next 18 months or so, as they start their initial auctions, they will be introducing the SOV to the general public.
Will the SOV also be globally available?
Yes, the SOV will be globally available. They're as part of those auctions, anyone who passes the KYC AML requirements will be eligible to take ownership. And there is a workflow that is being developed to help manage that right now.
Excellent. We had a question come in. If inflation doesn't respond as expected, do you have a way to change the supply velocity of the currency?
I can take probably this one. This is a very interesting question also from a theoretical perspective. What we know is that like when you have central bank digital currencies, you are able to monitor very closely the circulation and the speed, the velocity of circulation of money. This gives for sure like a government or a central bank the opportunity to introduce incentives to help people to avoid money hoarding. So like the problem is that like when you have when you want to increase velocity, you need to be able to increase the demand of money for transaction purposes. We know that like sometimes people prefer to store currency, money in terms of like because they provide like a store of value. So like, yes, there are ways to affect like this demand and to increase velocity if necessary. We have to keep in mind that like the supply is kind of predetermined in this model, which makes however inflation easier to control in some sense. So like it's a balance between supply and demand in this case.
And just to build on top of Andrea's comment there, I think this is an area that we're very excited about investigating more. As I mentioned, we have the opportunity to structure these types of incentive programs on a much smaller scale with a much smaller subset of the overall population. We can write a smart contract that creates those types of incentives, or we can create a new product or a new asset that creates those types of incentives. And then if proven to work with a small subset of the population, can be programmatically expanded and then can go direct to consumer, can be implemented at the retail level, can be anywhere within kind of the supply chain of money. And so we're very excited to iterate with them on these different types of financial instruments and create these incentives.
Absolutely, thank you. We've had a few questions come in about the SOV relative to local currencies. How will you determine the value of the SOV, and will it be circulating kind of alongside the US dollar?
Yeah. So initially, it will be circulating alongside the US dollar. We're working, again, to put the right incentives in place so that people can transition from US dollar to SOV at their desire. One of the key things that the Republic of the Marshall Islands highlighted was even inter-island transfers can be very complicated and costly. In some situations, people are shipping duffel bags of money on containers and freight lines between islands to just get payments done. And so as they've been building out their wireless and their internet connectivity across all of these islands, we believe that they now have not only the technical and communications infrastructure, but they also have an opportunity to introduce a more streamlined payment mechanism between each one of these islands. So I think that was a core driver for them as well. And hopefully that transition will enable them to be or will incentivize them to use the SOV more frequently as opposed to the US dollar. But initially, they will run alongside to limit disruption. And then in terms of pricing, as I mentioned, the TRMI, their monetary rollout program, which is the 18-month rolling auctions, is really how they're going to do price discovery. And so on the back end of those auctions or that auction mechanism, they will have a set price. It's not going to be pegged to a specific fiat, but that is the way that they are doing price discovery.
Yeah. Thank you. Kind of circling back to the Algorand blockchain and the technology, we've had a few people ask what the functionality of the co-chains will be and whether that's the same as the public chains. And secondly, is the technology of the co-chains open source?
Yeah, good question. So the co-chain will be effectively a one-for-one of the Algorand main chain. So when there is an update where we create a new template for a new asset, or we add a new standardized smart contract, you'll be able to take all of the technology that we're releasing on the public chain and then implement it and apply it within your private co-chain. The primary difference between the co-chain and the public chain really comes down to the validators and the people who are allowed to transact within that private enclave. And that's a process that will be managed by whoever's in charge of that co-chain. In this case, it's the Republic of the Marshall Islands and the foundation that they've set up. So they will be doing the management and the onboarding of people into their private enclave. But they still have all of the open source technology benefits of the Algorand standard asset, atomic transfers, the same core consensus that helps secure and govern. They just have the full control over who gets to see the transactions and who's validating those transactions. So from a usability standpoint, they get to enjoy all of the same benefits. And as we add more technology to the public domain, their code chain will get upgraded as well. And so they get kind of the best of both worlds in that perspective.
We had a question similar to just with the technology. About the technology as well. So for the transactions for this particular application, are they also going to be compiled with other applications on the Algorand blockchains, sort of in the same block or block space?
I'm not sure I'm going to answer it because I'm not sure I fully understand the question, but if the question is, can you build an application that works within a co-chain and then also can point and work within the main net? Absolutely. Again, the assets all look identical so long as you have permission to run your application within the co-chain. You obviously would need to be onboarded by whoever the governing party is, but your code should work and look identical on either platform. And so you could have a public version that might be your freemium model, and then you've got your private enclave that you can customize or white label and that you could sell into each co-chain as an example, if that was the way you wanted to structure your software package. So I think, if the question is about interoperability, you can think of it as, the same underlying platform, just with some privacy and security controls.
Okay, sorry, forgive me. I think they meant compite. So yes, that answers the. We had another question come in about any sort of transaction fees. How will people be able to pay those? And will you need to own any algos in order to do that?
Yeah, good question. So as we mentioned on the onset, if you're going from a co-chain to the public main chain, well, the public main chain is denominated in algos. And so you would need to have algos to transfer assets or move between those two enclaves. Within the enclave, we're actually working to help people figure out or set what they want their transaction fee to be, depending upon how much infrastructure they envision running. You could imagine a co-chain is just a single node, or you could imagine having a whole node network of hundreds of nodes, in which case you need to come up with the right economic incentive for that network to run and function and continue to support your co-chain. And so we're giving the flexibility to the people that want to run and manage these co-chains. Some people obviously are denominating in their own currency. Others are using algos just for simplicity to move between the two different co-chains. But that's the structure is up to the person managing the co-chain.
Okay, and on a practical level, in terms of adoption for the citizens of the Marshall Islands, is there sort of any public awareness campaigns or education that's going to take place prior to the launch to kind of get people on board?
Certainly, yeah. We're working very closely with the Republic of the Marshall Islands and more broadly within the technology consortia and the people who are helping put this legislation into place. We're meeting with the local retailers. We're meeting with the local officials. So we are lockstep with them to help build out the awareness campaign, help them understand when they can transition, how they get access to this, what particular stores they'll be able to go and either exchange their dollars for SOV, or if they would like to pay in dollars and get their change in SOV, how they could then charge their electronic balance. And so yes, there is a much larger campaign that's being pulled together, and I'd be happy to work with Kelly to keep people up to date. Kelly is the head of marketing here at Algorand.
If I can add one thing, like also the creation of the SOV is embeds also the creation of development foundation, so a sort of like an institutional organization that like who has an important, one of the goals they has is to actually promote like the development of new projects and new application and new adoption of the currency after launch. So like yeah.
Excellent. And on the user level, what sort of infrastructure is needed to use the SOV?
So there's going to need to be an address that you would need to be able to access, whether that's through a web-based interface or through a mobile-based interface. We're working on potentially both options right now. And so we're hoping to provide people with a variety. We're also looking at integrating with the existing payment infrastructure and the existing ATMs and the terminals that are there, so that if you want, you can direct access direct from the web, or you can have a physical version. You can think of it as like a prepaid debit card that you can go to any of these terminals and charge up. Again, we've got another technology partner that we're working with to develop the physical charge cards that people would be able to use either if they're offline or otherwise. So we've got some exciting user experience things that we're looking forward to announcing and bringing to fruition.
Well, excellent. I think we've kind of wrapped up the questions. Please let us know if you have anything else left else that you'd like to ask, you can put it in the Q&A function, but I'll allow David and Andrea to kind of, if there's anything you'd like to touch on in these last few minutes, please go ahead.
I'd just like to reiterate our thanks. And again, thank you, Sophia. Thank you, Sierra. Thank you, the entire GBBC team for helping us pull this together. It's a great opportunity for us to continue to connect with one another, share updates as most of us are working from home during these times. So thank you all. And yeah, really appreciate the opportunity to share our updates.
Yes, the GBBC would also like to express its thanks to Algorand and particularly David and Andrea for today's presentation and for taking the time to answer our audience questions. A copy of this presentation will be made available online shortly, and please keep an eye out for future member forums. We'll be posting them on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Eventbrite, with the next one being on April 16th. So these take place every even-numbered Thursday for the foreseeable future. Of course, if you have any questions, feel free to contact us at media@gbbcouncil.org. Thank you so much for taking the time, everyone, today to join us. We look forward to the next one. And thank you, David and Andrea, for your time.
Thank you.